So hello, everyone. My name is Jervis Johnson, and I go by the nickname Jay. So I am one of the co-leaders of the Enterprise Agile meetup here in San Francisco. We've been going on now for about 4 years, and we focus and concentrate mostly on, I would say, enterprise stuff, big company, agile transformations. And that's generally the topics and subjects we focus on, and the speakers that come, or the sharing or workshops we do. Last year was a great year for us. We were COVID, basically made everyone go virtual, which means most people, you can join meetups anywhere in the world now. Originally, we'd have meetings in our headquarters here and other places in the city, and people would come, which is great. Kind of missed the interactions, but this is great too. It's just different. So that was one change that's happened. We also have different speakers throughout the year. Last year was phenomenal. We had some great speakers. This year it looks like we're going to have some great ones too. So stay tuned. Tonight we're going to have a really good treat. So two gentlemen are going to talk about their stories and their experiences with Agile Transformation and Scaled Agile Framework. I know these two gentlemen for a while. I consider them colleagues, and I'm thrilled that they're here to share their experiences. So I'm going to turn it over to Billy Whala and Joseph Barjis, or Dr. Barjis, and have them introduce themselves in detail. They're phenomenal human beings. So I'm so happy that they're here. So Billy or Joseph, take it over.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. I don't think I can beat that introduction. That was really precise and concise, if we can call it that. So I really want to thank everyone, first of all, for joining. And this is a great opportunity because Jay just said, right, I'm in Phoenix. So there was no way I could have come in person to, SFO. Maybe once in a while I could have, but now I'm actually being able to attend a lot of these meetups. So it's a wonderful opportunity. So what I'm going to do is today we're going to talk about, so we're going to share our stories, right? Now we're going to make it a little bit interactive as well. So I want you guys to just be laid back and relaxed. So this is interaction where you don't have to do your heavy lifting brain activities, right? So what we really want to do, Joseph and I want to do, is create this environment where we are walking through our journeys, right? But we want you guys to imagine at that point of time where you were and what you were doing, right? Now, since you're part of this group, I'm imagining that you have something to do with Agile. So that's where we will be it will be culminating into that, right? Where we all come together and we say, hey, this is where we are. So that's really what we would like to do. And then we have our presentation kind of segmented out into 3 areas, the past, the present, and future. And we would really like to get your ideas on, what do you guys think about what the future holds, right? What you think you would like to do. So having said that, as other people are joining again, I just want to go ahead and get started. My name is Billy Whala. Now, I have put SPC after my name because, most of the transformations that I've been involved with have something to do with Scaled Agile Framework, right? And the title that I have right now also, as you can see, is Agile Transformation Manager. So it's a more strategic role in doing the transformations in Silicon Valley Bank, right? Now, again, that's a bank, if you're familiar with it. It's located in the San Francisco Valley, right? Or Bay. That's what you guys refer to. All right, so that's kind of a high-level introduction for me. Joseph, why don't you jump in and do a quick introduction to yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, once again, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. That's a great honor to have this opportunity to interact with you. As my esteemed colleague Billy said, it's not as much about us, even if we say the story of the two people, it's rather we cherry picked some good moments from the past and the present when we were engaged in SAFe implementation. So think about that we are sharing with you some good episodes of the experience we had and also some opportunities and challenges that we faced. With that being said, so I must share with you that I have two lives. I have an academic life where I am an adjunct professor at the university and I am teaching basically agile to graduate students, and I teach in the heart of Silicon Valley, San Jose State University. And as full-time job, I work either as a consultant or I work as a full-time employee. Right now, I'm a full-time employee with the company. So the experience obviously ranges from startups to Fortune 50 multinational corporations, from top research universities, obviously, to top consulting companies that we will talk about this more in the coming minutes. So we are looking forward that we will have a good discussion, a good Q&A, a good interaction with all of you. And that will become not a story of the two coaches, but it will become a story of 20 of us sitting in this meeting rather than just two of us. In case if throughout this presentation or interactions, you hear that I say that I did this, I led this, or I was doing this, please immediately translate it into we. Maybe by habit, sometimes we say I, but you can imagine that Agile by its very nature is a collaborative work, let alone if you are engaged in a major transformation. So everything that at least I present, I'm sure that's true also for Billy. These are coming from team efforts, from collective and group effort. So Billy, back to you. So you would like to dive a little bit deeper into Billy. Where did you start? You look to me like uh, probably you came to the United States, and then please tell us a little bit about your maybe immediate past, and then uh, we will talk more about.
Yeah, absolutely, Joseph. Yeah, before I talk about that, I definitely agree that everything that we do, at least in the Agile space, is very collaborative. So, Joseph and I, we have kind of, our at least our professional paths have crossed with each other, and that's where we will talk about those intersections. But then, the other thing is the reason we are doing this presentation together is because of that very collaborative nature, right? And as you all know, that's really the case that applies in the environment that we are in. So definitely keep that in mind, right? And when you're sharing your stories, we'll keep that in mind as well. That we'll assume that you're being collaborative as well, unless you want to call out and say, no, this is just me who did this, and we'll be okay with it. So really, Joseph, going back to your question, just wanted to share that I wasn't born here in the US. My journey has, started way back when I was born, but really, what I wanted to share right now is that in around 1999, before the turn of the century, I don't know, it just happened to be like that. I didn't time it that way. But really came to the US to get a higher degree, right? But then the fun part was, and the funny part was really, I didn't realize that for a long time. I ended up in a place called Oklahoma City. Now, some of you may not have heard it, and it's okay if you haven't heard it. And I say that intentionally because anyone that I spoke to, and I mentioned, especially in India, that I was going to US, I had to, say that because, whenever I said I'm going to Oklahoma City, no one knew where it was, right? Because everyone had heard about Chicago, New York, San Francisco. So out of all the places, I just landed up over there. And then, I got my MBA degree there, Joseph. There was a private university called Oklahoma City University. And really, I got my finance degree over there. So I'm looking at the slide, Joseph. Looks like you have similar kind of a story, right? Do you want to just kind of mention how you got here to the US, and then what were your thoughts behind moving here?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I must say that my roots are in the academia. So my career also started with academic career. So if I look back, my most serious episode of career was 4 years postdoctoral research at Delft University of Technology, and that was in the Netherlands. That was my country before moving to the US. But that happened after my PhD that I received from Moscow, from Russia. And I was born in Afghanistan, in Kabul. I studied in Russia. So after PhD, moved to the Netherlands. So that 4 years basically shaped what I am doing to do. I did in-depth study of how organizations are operating. And today I benefit from that knowledge, because when you go to organization and implement a new way of working, which we call agile, you got to understand the nuts and bolts of an organization. Of course, you can always bring a new framework, but if you want to make a fundamental changes to an enterprise, you got to understand how the organization is constructed, how it is operating. So that knowledge was very fundamental and instrumental for me. As for my agile acquaintance, I got my agile exposure with a global major bank in the Netherlands. And this happened, I was professor at the university. One of my graduate students got a graduate thesis, and he was working for that bank. And he was studying the methodologies and frameworks and techniques that the bank was using or considering to use in order to develop software products or complete software projects. That was the beginning. It was back in 2008, 2009. Back then, it was a question whether agile is a good approach, or whether RAP is a good, or whether Scrum is a good approach, or whether it's a DSDM a good approach, or maybe V model, or maybe waterfall. So remember, 2008, 2009. So we did that study, and I was supervising the study. And that basically resulted in a very good tool. And that tool was given to the project managers, especially software project managers, so they can decide that the project and the teams that they got, whether that project and that the team situation is good for agile or something else. And there are three significant factors that we identified. And those factors are the project budget, the project duration, and the project requirement. So you look at these three significant factors, then we developed, well, this student developed, and I was supervising one of the supervisors. He developed a tool, and we later on we published that tool as a scientific or research paper. And some other characteristics that you needed to take into consideration was like, how is the development stability? What is the risk clearness? What is the project size? What is the team size? How is the stakeholders flexibility? So all these characteristics must be entered into the tool, and then the tool will help you which of the software development approaches are good. Again, Spiral, V-model, Waterfall, Scrum, RAP, or what. That was the beginning of his exposure to. And 2010, we did publish that for, and I would like to see if I can basically share with you a link to that published work. So I just placed in the chat room a link that whenever you get a chance, you can look at that and see what is that paper about. So,
So Joseph, I'm just inquisitive, right? Because around the, before the beginning of the turn of the century, I came here, right? So it was a cultural shock for me, for sure. But during that same time, you actually landed up in from Afghanistan to Moscow and Netherlands. So how was that journey? I know we're talking about professional work, but did you learn new languages? Did you pick up anything new from your culinary skills, cooking skills, anything around that?
Yes, Billy. Frankly speaking, now that you look back and the number of changes and the number of cultural, linguistic differences that you've been exposed and how like smoothly you went through them without even definitely imagine you come from a country like Afghanistan, different society, different linguistic, different cultural, and suddenly you happen. That was the last years of Soviet Union. No, literally the last year and after that. That was a wonderful experience. And then you moved to the Netherlands. That was a great. And through all this process, you learn and you appreciate the cultural diversity, Billy. And that's exactly what we need when we go to an enterprise, especially that today you hardly find any team in the agile world that is not a diverse culturally, geographically, and ethnicity wise in many aspects. That was a very good thing. So back to you, Billy, if you would like to share more about so what happened next. So you came to Oklahoma City, which was not a famous city, but I'm sure that you contributed to the fame of the city by getting your MBA and what else?
I don't know about that, but I would like to share because we were talking about the cultural shock, right? So let me share this small story with you. So when I ended up in Oklahoma City, right? So I had just grown up watching all these American movies and shows, right? And the things we did not have any kind of we could watch any movies, right? So they could be rated anything, and there was a lot of curse words, as you can imagine. And when I come here and I start interacting with people, and I am actually using those curse words. Now, Oklahoma City University is a private, I think it's a Christian university. And you can imagine if I'm just cursing in and out and what the reaction of people would have been. And then, after a few days, someone pulls me aside and says, Billy, looks like you need to correct your language. And I was like, what's going on here? So that was really a big cultural shock for me because I was thinking America is all about as it's portrayed in the movies. Anyways, yeah, so that's kind of where I stood. But then, Joseph, really, after I graduated, I was looking out for work because not only do you need to look out for work, but you also need some kind of a sponsorship. And 9/11, by the way, happened around that time, right? So I graduated in 2002, and there's no work. But then, I was just fortunate enough because Deloitte picked me up as a consultant, and that's really where my work journey in the US started. So around that 2003 timeframe, out of all the other things, not knowing what to do, I just got hired as a consultant. Now, having lived the life of a consultant, I know it's very different, but back then it was just work, whatever I could pick up. So started out as a business analyst, but it was in the financial industry, and really got into the project management piece of it from that time onwards, right? And that's where I really honed my skills and the expertise. And by the way, you were introduced to Agile by that time. I was not. I was just doing that classic project management, the three things that you talked about, managing scope, budget. I was doing that. I was living and breathing that because that's really what was happening across the board. And then, having worked with Deloitte and a couple of other organizations, it just kind of grew into, like I said, the project management role. But then around 2009-ish is where, when I was with Fidelity, that's when I got introduced to Agile. And the way I got really introduced to Agile was through a coach who was coaching. And I was like, what's the role of the coach? Why is a coach in this work environment? Because you always see a coach outside in sports. And that's where my inquisitiveness really grew and started interacting with this coach really to figure out not just Agile, but what his role was. And I got really, really interested. So he really helped me get into the role, transition the role from a project management into a Scrum Master, really. And more than a role, it was more the mindset, right? So he helped bridge that gap from being a classic project manager and then, being a truly a Scrum Master, being a servant leader and all the other skills that you need as a Scrum Master. So, Joseph, how about you? After you got into Agile, I know you've been a professor. So did you pick up a job somewhere? Because I know you've been going back and forth in your profession to being a professor versus, being a practitioner. So how did that go after you landed up over here in the US after being in Moscow and Netherlands?
Yeah, that's thank you very much, Billy. And then in 2013, I moved to the United States. I moved to Silicon Valley, and that was my departure from a full-time academic job to full-time industry job. So that will be for the first time in 2013, I will enter the industry world and become, but I never left my part-time professorship. So always, all these years up to this moment, I still kept my part-time professorship. So here is what happened, really interesting. And when I came to the United States, my first agile job was with Autodesk. Autodesk that located in San Francisco, One Market Street. And that was not too far from where Jay's office was. And often we will see each other during lunch and we will brainstorm about. So basically, Jay is my mentor and he will teach me lots of things around Agile and we will brainstorm, discuss. And this gentleman means a lot for me in Agile career. So what I would like to share with my colleagues here in the room with 25 of you is Autodesk agile positions that I had taught me a very important lesson. And that lesson was that us coaches, when we go to organization, we not only teach and coach teams, but we also have enormous opportunity, Billy, to learn about that products that our teams are developing. That's what I learned, realized in Autodesk. I think I was like a few sprints into the product. Then I switched my mind from coaching to learning the product itself. I will go through the entire product backlog. And I remember it was 154 items in the product. And I will go one by one, learn them. On one hand, I was able to help the product owner because I will identify user stories that were not well written or acceptance criteria that were ambiguous, etc. On the other hand, I learned the team was developing an enterprise dashboard. That enterprise dashboard was built on lakes of data coming from all types of usage of applications. So I was exposed to what does mean data lakes, what does mean data repositories, what does mean raw data, what is the work of data engineer, how data can be engineered and how can data be represented at the presentation. Finally, how data can be transformed into insight to the storytelling. That great lesson I learned from there, which basically later, a few years later, encouraged me to go all the way for data science professional certifications that I received from IBM. So, but the lab or the seed of data was basically implanted back then. So that's one thing that I would like to share with you all esteemed colleagues in this call, that how as Agile coaches, we broaden and deepen our product and knowledge and domain knowledge. So we not only stay all life Agile coach, but we learn about the product. So Billy, that was a great thing that I was my first full-time Agile coach / Scrum Master. And I will share more later.
Yeah, no, that's great, Joseph. So I know our topic is really to talk about our journey in Scale-Agile framework, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. And I also see the chat room lighting up. There are specific questions around SAFe as well, and we'll answer them in just a moment as well. Before we go on to the next slide, what I would really like to do is see if someone wants to, because we're talking about the past, right, about our journeys. So would be very happy to hear if someone else wants to share their journey and their story, and especially, if you have maybe moved to the US or, from any other country, and then also your introduction to Agile. So if anyone wants to share that, that'll be great. And don't be shy if you want to open up the video and share it, connect with people, that'll be great. Anyone? Jay, do you want to just kind of share your past journey a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So, hey everyone. Wow, that's cool. The light's coming in weird here. So, hey everyone, it's Jay again. So, I don't know, I might be the oldest one here, or the longest tenure. All I can see is pictures of some people, but I've been doing this, I don't know, 40 something years now. So I was at IBM for 20 years, and I was one of the early adopters of this Agile thing. Back in the day, it was extreme programming, and we did a bunch of cool stuff. And then we learned Scrum when that came out, and other things. And to be honest with you, a lot of things we did in the past in the software engineering world, we were experimenting. We didn't know what we were doing. We were learning. And then the product discipline kind of grew up. Now it's a major career and discipline now. I'm so old, I can remember that we had to sell the idea of having project managers. Because I don't know if y'all know, when project management started in PMI, people weren't too interested in paying people to do that kind of work. Okay, and now look at it. Now there's project managers everywhere, and now look what Scrum and Agile's trying to do, and large scale Scrum. They're trying to say, yeah, you don't need the project managers anymore. So that kind of tells you what happens in the world. But the project manager is still out there. That they're strong career and discipline. As we evolve, I think the biggest thing I'm learning today is, there's been so many I would say very few disruptions in life. The internet, of course, is one of them, and farming was one, and the industrial revolution. But I think where we're going now with artificial intelligence and machine learning, seeing what that's going to do to change society. I think we're in the midst of another significant revolution, where we're going to have debates between capital and labor, and we're going to see more a gap on income equality and living. Okay.
And Jay, hold on to your thoughts there, because we have a slide talking about the future. So we would really love to get your thoughts there. So yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah, so that's my background, and then that last thing I just said is kind of like my future look, but I'll wait till we get there.
Yeah,
but that's kind of been, I didn't know that. That's cool. So that's my experience, but I'm always a continuous learner. So I'm one of those people where I really believe I don't know nothing. I think I know everything. And then you get in a situation, I'm working in a major bank now, or other clients I work with, and you get to realize that the individuals and people you work with, that you still have a lot to learn. I'm a continuous learner. So that's where I'll end my sharing.
Thank you, Jay. Does anyone else want to share their journey on how it has been so far? Anyone interested in doing that? Okay. I know it's late evening, so we'll go on to the next slide. But please jump in, and would love to hear some of your stories that you have. All right, so let's see. There you go. All right, so what we really want to talk about is some of the experiences we have had implementing SAFe in some of these organizations. Now, I put down some of the organization names because I've worked with them directly, but then having worked with Deloitte, there were quite a few engagements I had. So wasn't really allowed to put down the names, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. So looks like, Joseph, just around the same time you were going through the same journey, and we can talk about where our journeys intersected as well. But around that 2012, 2013 timeframe, I know you shared a story about Autodesk, but what about these other engagements? Do you want to also highlight some of the challenges and successes you had with these organizations, and especially implementing SAFe?
Yeah, absolutely. With great pleasure. So basically, the first major experience with implementing SAFe, that was Discover Financial Services. That was a major bank. And that is where I met my esteemed colleague Billy. So Billy basically hired me for that position. He was already head of the for the companies that we were working, Cognizant, he was the head of the coaches. And so I joined his team and we started implementing SAFe. So again, as I said, we will share with you those episodes that are either lessons or good experiences that at least we can disseminate, or the lessons that we learn, or the opportunities. So that's the purpose of. So this is what happened at Discover Financial Services. I joined, you can imagine, this is a big organization. The wing of the organization or line of business that I joined, Deposit, we had 5-7 Scrum teams. And that's 5-7 Scrum teams. After few months, we grew it, we evolved it into a full-fledged ART. So ART stands for Agile Release Train, just in case if we have colleagues that are new to the SAFe terminology. So that means that we grew it to evolve it to an Agile Release Train. We launched first Agile Release Train, and I was playing the role of the RT because we didn't have even a trained RT. So I played the role of RT for the first launch. Then few months later, we launched another art, and together we had 3 arts, and we basically launched a solution train, which was comprised. So the reason I am mentioning this is that agile implementation has a momentum. And if the leadership and if the agile coaches, they don't catch that momentum, that spirit and enthusiasm that people believe that agile is a more effective way, you lose it. That was a great example of how we seize that momentum as coaches, but more importantly, how the leadership of the organization sees that moment. That's one thing I wanted to share. Second thing that, Bailey, I would like to share was, we didn't have a short and quick training for teams to understand what is PI planning. Again, for those colleagues new to terminology, PI stands for Program Increment. PI planning is a major planning that agile teams are doing for several weeks into the future, usually for 8 to 12. In our case, it was for every 12 weeks. Now imagine you bring 100 plus people into that PI planning, yet you don't have a quick and fast training. So we developed a PI simulation, and then we developed a PI schematics, and eventually it became a very good artifact that we contributed to the Scaled Agile framework. And I gladly want to share that link also with you in the chat room. And Billy, if I may, I will share one last thing, and then I will come back to you.
No, please do. Please do.
I know that the wealth of your experience from that engagement is much greater. The third thing that I would like to share with you from that engagement was how important is the role of leadership in a successful SAFe implementation. In my humble opinion, Billy, and you can correct me, the Discover Financial Enterprise SAFe journey was one of the successful ones. I must say one of the best ones that I've seen. And the role of the leadership, I can give you 3 examples. In one of the Scrum teams, the vice president of the organization is sitting just next to me. Literally, our shoulders are touching each other. And during the sprint review, that was sprint review, at the end, he turned his face to the Scrum Master and told the Scrum Master that if you have any impediment that you can resolve it. You know where is my office? And his office was on the same level. You just stop by my office. I will pick up the phone. So that was the time of the physical world. I will pick up the phone and will resolve it and reach to the people that they can resolve it. That was one example that really shocked me, that power of the leadership. The second example, although I'm not 100% sure because I was told by another colleague that one of the top leaders in the organization said, I want to discover a capability that if in the morning there is a new user story coming, by the end of the day, I want that new user story to be in production. Again, this is few years back, and this is not Amazon, this is not Microsoft, that's a bank. And the third example that I want to share with you is that all the leaders at the manager or director levels that they went through training, they will enthusiastically put in their signature certification of their SAFe, just to showcase to the organization their dedication and engagement. So with that, Bailey, I would like to share with all of colleagues that if you want to have a successful SAFe implementation, dedication, engagement of the leadership of the organization is number one. Regardless how many powerful consultants you bring, but the leadership will make the difference. Billy, please you share with us. You were, as I said, you went all the layers of the organization from team to team, probably all the way to the executive level.
Yeah, Joseph. Yeah, and also let me take everyone back a little bit. Also, what I really want to start doing is start answering some of these questions as well. So I'm going to tie that in. So before I got into financial, Discover Financial, my SAFe journey really started with American Express, right? So they had identified and recognized that SAFe is the way to go. So I think there's a question here, like, how do you figure out that SAFe is the way to go? How do you determine and engage your customers, your clients, the companies that we interact with, we consult with? How is that determined? So really, I want to share this, right? In American Express, when I got there, someone had already made up the mind to be using SAFe, right? So that was really a raw way of me getting introduced to Scale-Agile framework, right? I was inquisitive because, we had the Scrum framework, we were implementing that before I got to American Express, but also Kanban, right? But then the whole question, I was talking with my colleagues, with other folks, on how do we really scale this up? So Dhruti, really to answer your question, at that time, I just got thrown into it, really. I was not the determining power to really determine that, hey, SAFe is the way to go. So I learned it the hard way because, there were some good things. I was looking for something that we could use from a scaling perspective, and Scale-Agile framework had already come around. I don't remember what version they were at. So that's kind of how I got into it. I had no role in defining that. Now, now did I start questioning? Maybe at some point, but keeping in mind the shuha thing, right? Because I was learning, I just stuck with that principle of really learning the framework and how it really needs to be implemented and brought together. So that's kind of how I learned. And then, by the time I got to, I'm going to skip Sherwin-Williams for a moment, because that was an interesting story as well. It's a paint company, just completely fun stuff that they used to do. But then, Joseph, when I got to Discover, I'd already had quite a lot of experience in figuring out what is a framework that needs to be used, right? So when we were in Discover, even though they were implementing Scale-Agile framework, there was a need that, and by the way, we did come up with something called an ingrown framework, which is called DMS, Discover Management Services. I still remember that. So it was very similar to SAFe. So that's where, even though, again, the organization had kind of determined that they wanted to use SAFe, what we started doing at the leadership level was, what are you looking for, really? Are you really looking for SAFe, or are you really trying to adopt and transform from an agile perspective, your culture and everything else? So we did not really implement scaled agile framework. That's when I kind of started taking off and started, adopting to the culture of the organization. So really, to answer your question, right, you were asking like, why not less? Why not any of the other frameworks? So in that environment, Scrum was already, we had introduced Scrum, we had already introduced Kanban, and then from a scaling perspective, we built that new framework, which is pretty similar to Scaled Agile framework, but we kind of modified that, right? So that's kind of how it really started coming together. And I really want to emphasize that, right? Even though we are saying it's a story of two SAFe coaches, right? The reason we call it that because it has been an integral part of our lives, but we are not just promoting SAFe, right? Because there are other frameworks, depending on the need of the hour, depending on the need of the organization. That's really what we use. If they are too immature, even to have a scaled framework somewhere in their organization, we probably don't even start there. We start putting together the pods together, bringing in the Scrum framework, and then, and really, by the way, and I'll accept this, I do not have a lot of experience with less, and that's why I don't recommend that. But I do bring in folks that are very familiar with less, and if that makes sense in that environment, we definitely start using them. So just wanted to kind of share that experience with you because, again, we are all in different environments, work with different organizations for different needs. So, Jyoti, did I answer your question? Did you have any follow-up question?
No, thank you so much for answering that. But generally, I work with Wells Fargo, and we in Wells Fargo has two different sub-organization practicing two different things. Technology is trying to implement less versus the product development on digital end is heavily already kind of close to new to mature in
Okay.
SAFe. And I am trying, what I was trying to understand is uh, when one organizational leadership decide like collaboratively to bring two different scale framework in the organization, what are the connective points or what are the key factors to determine this goes here versus there?
Okay, wow. That's really interesting, Jyoti, right? Because I don't think I have been in a similar situation. Whatever organization that I have worked with, they have chosen one or the other, right? So never have I seen that kind of a combination. So it would be interesting. I know, Jay, I don't want to put you on the spot. Looks like we've already gone off mute. You knew there was a question coming. Have you heard that? Now, Jyoti, I mentioned Jay's name because he's engaged with Wells Fargo right now. So I just want to get his perspective on that.
Yeah, so Wells is going through a journey. So I've been with him for like about 3 years now in different areas of Wells. So, a leader came on, Saul Vanderburden, and he came from Chase and ING with a lot of experience with Agile transformation. He brought some people on board. Now, most to what Billy and everyone says right now, most regulatory companies and large organizations, including Boeing and Joseph's going to talk about, I'm sure, and other large companies, they generally gravitate towards SAFe because it generally aligns with their culture. They don't have to make a lot of organizational cultural changes. So if you take the roles that are in SAFe, like an RTE, you can relate that to program managers to some extent and other leaders. So there's a lot of, Dean did, and his team did a lot of concentration on different levels of a large company and organization, right? From the very top, from the themes, from how you do budgeting, I can't say a word, participative budgeting, which is a new thing they came out with. Now he's added product in there and design thinking, some product discovery with SAFe 5 and 5.1 that's coming out, which is good because he's always growing and evolving. But the structure is amenable to many people that run these large organizations, especially financial services companies in the United States. If you go to another framework like large scale Scrum, it's totally different with a totally different ideology. So Greg Larman and Boss Fodi, when they came up with that, it was all about organizational change. So their position is, and I'm not kidding about this, is to remove all the project manager, program managers from the company. That's number one. Second, you got to change your organization completely and lean it out. And you have these product owners have vast power and they make all investment decisions and so forth. And so does the area product owners for less huge. But basically it mandates a significant organizational change from a software hardware company background that they came from, right? Most large financial services or even large other companies inside the United States, in my experience, are not going to take that on for various reasons, for various good reasons, I think. They're not going to want to agree to that. Now, certain companies like Apple, Google, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, they would never adopt SAFe because it would be anti-cultural to them. So they're more aligned to less, but not exactly less. But they do create feature teams, full feature, full functional teams. So at Wells, we're doing an experiment. That's where I'm going. So SAFe's been there for a while, and they've gone through this journey over the last 10 or 15 years. A long time ago, 15, 20 years ago, they were a lean engineering shop. But now, Rich Chung and Saul and all of them have come on board, and they say, well, let's, so Wells is so big, let's do an experiment, and let's bring less in and see if we can do that in certain areas, right? And see if the outcome, the result, are we making the customer better off? Are we able to get products to the market, really good products? Are we able to disrupt the market? Will this way of working, a way of thinking, which is different than SAFe, remember, it's an ideological difference, will that make a difference? So it's an experiment. Does that help?
It does, but I do have a follow-up question, but I want to be mindful of everyone.
Okay, cool. You can reach me because my email, I'll put it out there. You can reach me anytime you want.
Great, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, and by the way, we do have a moment, Dhruti, but what I want to do is, while you connect with Jay offline, has someone else, because I don't have an answer to this, right? So I would really like to know this, if someone can mention this. Have any of you guys had that kind of an experience? Now, Scrum and Kanban and SAFe can coexist, but, I don't think I have heard where SAFe and less can actually coexist. Does anyone have any experience with that, besides Dhruti, obviously?
That's a good question. Thank you, Billy, for seizing this momentum, because the whole idea of this session is not listening just to two people, but to many of us. And also, Billy, I would love if you give Dhruti a chance, because she seems to have more points. In case of other colleagues, they do not have Dhruti, you can follow up instead of keeping that question, because I must tell you that this is a crucial question and this important question. Do you want a hierarchy agility or you want a flat agility? So
but does anyone have a perspective on that? If anyone's been in that situation?
I can ask multiple questions rather than perspective.
That was a really interesting one, yeah. Why don't we, Joseph, do this? If we have time at the end, we can definitely circle back and continue on that conversation, right? Because I don't want to bore everyone else just talking about this one thing. Now, Joseph, why don't you talk about how, and there's also a question in the chat room about when you actually go into an organization, right? What are some of the things that you do? And, especially if you talk about scaled agile framework, say, right? Maybe there's an assessment that you do, but once you have kind of settled down there, right? From a adoption transformation perspective, do you go and just start working with pods or teams and start putting them together, or do you do something called value stream mapping, because that's a critical part, and then start forming something called arcs, right? So do you want to kind of just walk us through and just kind of share and also answer the question that's there in the chapter? How do you go about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a very fundamental question. First of all, thank you to colleague who posed this question in the chat room, and thank you, Billy, that you did not forget about that question. It's so fundamental that in my current organization, for the last probably 3 months, we are thinking about value stream mapping. Not that we can do it, but we are just thinking what is the right approach, what is the right level. And do we have one value stream or we have multiple value streams? I must say that I have seen many arts or SAFe implementations that they went without value stream mapping. That is nothing wrong about it. That's perfectly fine. You can go. But the way that SAFe prescribes, or the way that SAFe thinks is SAFe implementation is more successful if at the beginning of the journey or implementation of SAFe, you find out what are the values and what are the products that my organization is making money or delivering to the society. What services we deliver to the society. Let's have a look at those values or products, could be tangible or intangible product. And let's have a look who are our customers and what triggers these products and how we deliver them, how we make them, like what are the major steps. I think starting with value stream mapping has many, many benefits. First of all, it will uh, allow the organization to see themselves as part of one holistic system. Suddenly, barriers and silos where they will collapse because they immediately see themselves as part of one sequence of value delivery rather than towers and doors. That's one benefit. Another benefit is you may find out many opportunities for improving your processes because you might find bottlenecks in your value stream. And that optimization that you would like to do will be rather based on the bottlenecks than on isolated nodes. But of course, SAFe is doing this not for that purpose. SAFe is doing it how we can align our development teams that they are along the value stream so they can support the entire value stream. And so in terms of complexity, a value stream could be as simple that you can do it literally in 2-3 hours, literally in 2-3-4 hours. But it could be as complex. So let me give you my example. The easiest value streams that I ever mapped, it took me around 2 to 4 hours. The most complex ones that I was part of it, it took us 3 months. 3 months full time, a team of 5-6 people will come 8 a.m., 5 p.m., 8 a.m., 5 for 3 months in order to do value stream. That was the most complex one. So that much I would like to share with you without boring you too much into that. And the good things that we found that if you do value stream mapping, then your art formation is becoming very natural. You will be not guessing whom shall I put together into one team. The value stream basically will drive that one because immediately after operational value stream, you will find out what are the systems and IT applications that supports the business level or the operation level. Did you immediately see, okay, now that I know, let's say 10 applications, they jointly support the operational value stream. Let me identify how many people are maintaining, developing, and enhancing these systems. Those will be candidates for your art. So I will make a pause here, Billy, so you can add to that, and also the audience may have comments.
Joseph, there's also a follow-up question, so maybe I can take that. But let me step back, right, before I answer that question. Like, where do I start, right? Do I start with value stream mapping? I'll share this story with you. When I started on my journey with Scaled Agile Framework, I did not do value stream mapping, right? Because the version that they were at, there was not very big emphasis around that. And by the way, remember, I was learning, I was very green around Scaled Agile Framework, and the people that I was working with, they were not doing that as well, right? But then as I started looking more closer, it started making more sense to me. So by the time I got to more like Joseph Discover working with you, right? It was very critical. It was very important to really have that as a starting point to really look at value stream mapping. And by the way, the lens that I was really putting on was, what's the purpose of putting these arcs together, right? Because what was happening is we're just converting these projects into waterfall teams, and nothing else changed, right? Not a whole lot of things changed. But when we actually started analyzing how the value streams need to be put together, how they need to be functioning, that's where some of the conversations around the roles, not the titles, but the actual roles that are needed, and the delivery, what value that we are really creating, not just, we are putting the framework just for the heck of putting a framework together. That's where, I started questioning, like, yes, SAFe may be a good framework, but then, they're not critical things that you really, those are the building blocks. And value stream mapping is one of those critical blocks. And that's definitely something, if you are implementing or if you're stepping into implementing SAFe, that's highly recommended. Now, some of the challenges that we have faced, just like Joseph said, right? It could take a few hours versus it could take a few months, right? So I've had similar experience as well, Joseph, right? Around 2 to 3 months. The reason being, people just did not understand what we are trying to do, why we are trying to do the value stream mapping. That was really the biggest challenge, bringing all the leaders together, right? Because it needed the leadership support to really do something called, the value stream mapping, to really figure out not only we needed to do that, but also their support behind that we may need to do some reorg, right? And by the way, we started with a pilot. The whole conversation with the leadership was that we are not going to do this enterprise-wide, organization-wide. We are just going to do a pilot, and that's where we need to do the value stream mapping. And that's where we may need to start doing a little bit of reorganization, because, anytime you go in and you start talking about change, there's a lot of resistance, there's a lot of pushback. So that's one of the biggest challenges that I faced, really trying to put those value streams, doing that analysis, really putting a strategy together on how the art should look like and how the team should look like. But I also would like to, if someone has implemented, say, besides Joseph and I, what experience have you guys had? Do you recommend value stream mapping? Do you have you figured out any other better ways when you engage with an organization? Anything? Prakash, I know you had that question. So do you have experience working in the Scaled Agile Framework environment?
Yes, I've been working with Scaled Agile Framework for the past almost 10 years or more than 10 years. In fact, SAFe people used to come to Cisco to learn a lot about large organizations, how they do, and the whole thing evolved as we were doing the Agile transformation. I was involved in fact, I was leading the Agile transformation across Cisco. At least in 2 divisions we did, and across Cisco we just started, but that didn't go too far. So yeah, we've done value streams there, not as part of the SAFe's approach, but we started with customer journey mapping and then identified where customer touch points are, where the trigger is, where the value flows. And that's where, when we did the app dynamic type of product, that's where we did a lot of that work. But in my other initiatives, I've been trying to drive this value stream mapping. And it's a challenge because people don't understand why it is required.
Right.
They don't want to do it. So that's where I was that's why I was asking the question. But I wanted to ask Joseph. You said you did something in 2 to 4 hours, and some took 3 months. That's a big gap, a big change, a big difference. I don't know why that much difference is there. Are you differentiating between value stream identification, value stream mapping, value stream optimization, all of those ones? Because identification may skeletally be possible to do easily, but mapping takes a lot of effort. Even identification, if you want to do the right job, where you want to identify all the systems that are already there within the organization that have been organically formed, it takes quite a bit of effort. Not as much as 3 months, but definitely not 2 hours or anything. It takes multiple sessions. So that's why I was wondering where the 2 hours came and where the 3 months came.
Great question, Prakash. Well, first of all, Prakash, thank you very much that you shared that you have a quite extensive experience with SAFe. The 2 hours came for a pizza shop. A customer comes to the pizza shop, places an order that I want a pizza, and the order is moved to the back to the baker, to the pizza baker. Hey, pizza baker, I have this order, bake it. The bakery bake the pizza, and then if it is in person, then the pizza is ready, given back. If it is delivery, then the pizza baker moves the pizza box to the delivery boy, and the delivery boy delivers the pizza, collects the money. So that was the easiest value stream. So basically, we had 4 things here: order completion, baking pizza, pizza delivery, and payment. Just if you look at the SAFe chevrons, so you have 4 chevrons. And the sophisticated one was for a multinational corporation, and the multinational corporation had many value streams. So the reason it took longer, because the organization wants to see not only the highest level, which was the strategic level, but also the operational level, but also the cross processes level, but also the data level. So basically, the organization wanted to say that if I buy a nut, literally a nut or a washer or any part, I want to see the movement of this part through the entire enterprise. That was the level. That's why it took longer, because we penetrated. So in value stream mapping, we have 2 dimensions. One is the horizontal, end to end. The other one is the vertical, how deep you want to go. Do you want to go to the numeric level when you also add numbers like lead time, processing time, wait time, everything? So that's what we did. That's why it took 3 months. That's why it took a team of 5-6 people, and it was and also the size of the organization was big, because we went to the data level, to data flow level.
And 2 thoughts on that. So these are mostly from the production or retail type of an environment, not software delivery type of an environment. And I think you are also including value stream identification and mapping and optimization, all of them together in that 3 months. That's why it is.
We did not do optimization within that period, but optimization was in mind. So we called it not just optimization, we called it simulation. So we basically stood up entire simulation group to do optimization of the process through simulation. For example, how about if I make changes here? How about if I move this process here? So that was also part. But I agree, and I love the usage of terminologies that you're using. You say value stream identification, value stream mapping, value stream analysis. This is the hierarchy. Value stream identification is first. Value stream mapping is second. Value stream analysis 3. Value stream identification, if you are lucky and if you are like putting together the right team, You can literally do it in half day for fairly complex enterprise identification. Because let's say I give you a bank, Wells Fargo, because many colleagues mentioned. You go to Wells Fargo as, hey, Wells Fargo, how many products you have? They say, well, we have like savings, we have mortgage, we have loan. These are our products. So literally, you could see 5 or 6 or maybe 10 products and say,
No, so what happens in each of these products, I'm working with a financial company right now. For each of these so-called products that we say, there are some 10, 20 systems that come together. There is this Oracle that you get, there is Salesforce, there is something else.
I
All
know,
of these things come together to make up one single product. And
yeah,
that mapping,
yeah,
some of these are organic. You never know what information flow happens where. People don't know.
yeah.
So even in those cases, it takes multiple sittings and weeks to do the value stream mapping. And
No,
so
Pankaj,
many organizations don't want to spend that kind of time in doing it. So my question was more on how do you sell this concept of the need for value stream mapping, that kind of thing. It's more in the financial organization context, actually.
right, right. I know that we are taking time, but Prakash, what I was going to was that identification is rather easier step, where the
Yeah,
difficulty
agree.
arises, that is in the mapping, because that is where the organization resists. Because then Wells Fargo asks you, hey, Prakash, I don't want this mapping to take weeks and spend so many resources. And then you have to have a convincing and plausible case why it is important. I would restrain from answer here, but I would be more than happy when Billy allows us at the end of the session to give you what we use, because we are facing exactly this, making a case why I need vice presidents, why I need senior directors to come and sit for days with me. Well, I requested 2 full days. That's what I'm requesting, but I have to make case, and I will share with you what was my case when we get a chance, Billy.
Yeah,
Okay,
sure.
sure. Yeah,
And
no,
in
this is
SAFe,
a, sorry, go ahead, Prakash.
yeah, and in SAFe, what happens is they've blurred the ideas between identification and mapping. They start with identification, but soon jump into mapping, and that's where the confusion comes. And when they call their 6-hour workshop, that just blurs the whole thing. You never can do it in that time. That's why my question was there.
Prakash, that 6 hours can be valid if that 6 hours workshop is for validating. So you already did the homework, you already interviewed, you already put together many things, you already have many of the things. Then you bring people. So merely they validated. That might be, but if you start from scratch, that will not happen in 6 hours. 6 hours will be gone very quickly for a complex
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I was going to say, because, you know, if you go into a workshop, which may last for 4 hours, and you may be done the first time, which by the way, has never happened for me, there's a lot of pre-work that needs to be done. And that's really the thing that takes the longest time, right? The identification as well as the mapping, right? Because once you get that down, you can talk about optimization and, you know, all these, you know, continuous improvement ideas that you want to talk about on how the value stream should be. So great discussion here, Prakash. I loved some of your questions and the thoughts that you had, especially since you're a practitioner, right? So it's great to share that experience around. Now, Joseph, anything else that you would like to cover in this area before we go on discussing about the future?
Not really, because I'm also conscious of time. But I think we had great conversation. We can talk about some things. Billy, what is next?
I just want to make sure, I'm just looking at the questions here. There was a value stream related question, so we can always circle back, Jyoti, if you allow us to. Don't see any other question here.
One question was, Billy, that how can I do, what is the, how to say, borderline between Scrum Master and coach? And if somebody says, I am Scrum Master and coach for the team. What does it mean? Like how this all changes? Where the Scrum Master role ends and the coaching starts? So that was the question. And I do believe that question came from Carla because she will enter into this role.
Okay,
sometime
right. I see that here. Great. Yeah, yeah. So really, in my mind, right, having done the coaching, and I would love to get someone else's perspective as well. Uh, it's just I just divided based on the experience, right? Now, on a personal preference, I have seen Scrum Masters who have had great experience. They're perfect candidates for coaches, but then they don't want additional responsibility. They don't want to be a coach in a bigger sense, and they just want to be confined to that Scrum Master role because they enjoy doing that. They just want to be part of that one or two teams, and that's where they're happy about, right? Where they want to be. But it's all about experience. That's what I feel really, and that's, by the way, how I have grown, right? Because as a Scrum Master, when I got mentored into that role, my whole question was like, how do I get into that coaching role? Because my mentor was a coach. So it was aspirational for me. For some people, it's not. So that's kind of how he mentored me into not only that role, but then since I was coaching other Scrum Masters, I organically grew into that role. But now, from a responsibility perspective, if you're trying to draw the line, right? So Scrum Master, I would say, is more inward looking from a coaching perspective. And what that really means is, keeping in mind the needs of the team members is very critical, right? So like facilitating, problem solving at the team level, that's their responsibility. But from a coach perspective, uh, as you know, it's a more holistic role. You're not just thinking about one team or one pod, or you're not just thinking about one Scrum Master. You are having a more holistic approach on, how do I take maybe this group of people from A to B, not A to Z, but it's very important and critical for a coach to understand where the program or a group of people or teams where they are, and just kind of meet them there and just take them on that journey. So that's really kind of how I distinguish that. But again, that's just based on my perspective and experience. I would love to get someone else's perspective as well. Like, how do you draw that line? How do you say that this person is a Scrum Master and this person is a coach? Any thoughts on that? Prakash, looks like you have a perspective on it.
Yeah. I mean, basically, Scrum Master is a coach. That's it. There are no, there is complete overlap. Is a Scrum Master is not a command and control type of a person. A Scrum Master is a coach and a facilitator. That's it.
Yeah.
So you're facilitating and you're coaching the team. So when you say you're a Scrum Master, that's what you're doing. So there is no conflict saying, oh, I'm a Scrum Master or a coach. Removing impediments, making things work for the team, being the servant leader is the role of the Scrum Master, and that's the role of the coach. So
but let me
I
ask
don't
you
see
this,
any difference.
because I've been in this situation where a Scrum Master has been in that role for say 6 months, right? Has not developed all these skills, but based on all the things that they hear, right? Like Scrum Master is a coach, and they come and start questioning the coach, not necessarily me, but a coach like, hey, I am the coach. Coach, don't come here and tell me what to do. So have you gone through that? And that's why
until they get it.
Yeah.
Yes. Until they get it. Yes, I agree.
And
No,
I think
not initially.
Right.
Yeah, there is a learning cycle. So after the learning cycle, I mean, yeah, that's the clarification. You're right. But ideally,
Yeah, I was
Jay,
gonna.
just turn your camera on. What's your perspective there?
Yeah, I was gonna suggest, since one of the company I work for is also a very large staffing company, and we work with a lot of corporations. And what's evolved, and I blame Lisa Atkins, is that Agile Coach has become a role, a more senior role. So now
Yeah.
Agile Coaches, there's different levels. There's an Enterprise Agile Coach, there's Team of Teams Agile Coach, there's even a DevOps Agile Coach, a Product Agile Coach, whatever. But now they're responsible for more than teams. They're responsible for multiple teams. They're responsible for the Agile transformation, the leadership of it for a very large company, like for thousands of people. Okay. They're responsible for change management. They're responsible for organizational change. They're responsible for setting up all the teams, like 200 plus teams. Got to get them all from waterfall to Scrum. Oh, and you got 1 month. So I'm joking, but not really. So, so now this concept of an Agile coach has evolved, I think. And as we place people and as we get job descriptions and job requirements from companies, over the last 15 years or so, I've seen it evolve to this kind of antimorphic type of person that can do everything. Right? They just put so much responsibility on you to make significant change in the organization, to get like 200 plus teams up and running and have a bunch of these Scrum Masters doing stuff, get DevOps going, and get the product organization and the product owners and the product managers going. All of that now, if you can do that and do it well, then hello, you're an Agile coach.
No, so that is you just said the enterprise coach kind of thing. The team level coach, the art level coach, who is the RTE, who is the art level coach, and then the enterprise level coach. There are different levels of coaches. Yeah. So that's why I said at the Scrum level, the Scrum Master is the Scrum level, team level coach.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Exactly. But now I think what we're doing now, what I'm seeing is we're keeping the Scrum Master or the senior Scrum Master in the team. So a Scrum Master, senior Scrum Master can be over like 3 teams. And we don't like to go over 3 teams. But once you get to that category of Agile coach, now all of a sudden you're over like many teams and have to transform and adopt many teams. And you lead the Scrum Masters, right? I don't know how that, well, I believe Lisa Atkins. I don't know how that happened, but it happened. And that's where we're at now. So when we get job descriptions and job requests from big companies, and they put the job description of what an Agile coach does, they generally put all the stuff in there that I just said.
Yeah.
So I have a follow-up question if there is a time.
You do, Jyoti. I was actually just going to bring up your interesting question. So go ahead. I know you're going to ask that question, right? That you just put in the chat room. Please go ahead.
No, actually, this one is different one.
Okay, because that one was interesting too.
Yeah. So so I actually put out 2 questions in the chat room. One about value stream, and the second one about transitioning to a role. So. Okay, I am an Agile Transformation consultant with Wells Fargo, and Jay might know what that means. But then when I tried to approach for transitioning, it's my personal experience as a Scrum Master, because I have a years of background as a project manager. And I kind of recall Jay mentioned that companies lean towards replacing project managers with pure agilist and something like that. So here I am finding very challenging for the transition that I am looking for. So I just want to understand the perspective of a hiring manager. Why so? Why what is the benefit of replacement versus training your own people?
No. So is this, the question is, are you stepping down from a transformation coach into a Scrum Master role because they don't need any Scrum transformation coach? Or is it that you're tired of doing that kind of a broad
So-
role, so you want to narrow your scope to the team level.
So, as Jay shared, there are like senior Scrum Master role, junior Scrum Master role. So, possibly I'm thinking of lateral move rather than stepping down or stepping up.
Okay.
Basically, like I'm a junior transformation consultant, coach, whatever we call it. And I have been supportive of not transforming team, but enabling team and that kind of supportive role. Now, if I, based on my prior project management experience, and if I could be completely thinking wrong, and I'm open to guidance and feedback. But the thing is, my thinking is, if I have an agile mindset and I have a facilitation skill of a project manager, I could be very well be playing a scrum master role. I could be completely wrong, and I'm open to all of your perspective, but this is my thinking. So
Yeah, Jyoti,
why am I experiencing challenging to make that transition? And it is, I'm putting me, because I can only speak for me, but I have very close colleagues and friends who have approached the same way and they have failed to do so.
right. Jyoti, I think it's a very good question of what you're just asking, right? So let me maybe address one piece of that, right? I don't know if I'll be able to address all the pieces there that you just laid out. So really, it depends on the managers, right? The way I have managed that and the way I have handled that is really influencing the manager to keep your assets, right? And so let's not even call them resources or roles, right? Let's not define it that way. So if you have been a project manager and you're coming into this new environment, Agile has come through, maybe you need to reskill from that perspective. But if you've been with an organization and you know, like you said, facilitation skills, you have the domain knowledge and things like that, I absolutely am of the opinion, just my point of view, that people can be mentored into those roles. Now, as far as transitioning from a coach role to a scrum master role, if you consider that to be lateral, I think it's a very personal choice that people can make. And I'll give you an example, right? Now, there are coaches that have worked at different levels, right? And let's call them team level coaches, program level coaches, portfolio level coaches. Now, if I'm talking to a portfolio level coach and I say, David, would you be willing to step into a program coach, kind of a situation? It's very personal because some people feel that they're stepping down. Some people feel, hey, coaching is coaching, right? So that's what I would consider the transitioning of a coaching role into a scrum master to be a very personal thing because, some people don't feel comfortable around them. But I have taken roles where, starting out, I had to step in and really mentor the scrum masters into, being better scrum masters. So I had to step into their role, not thinking that I'm going from a strategic coach role to being a scrum master, right? So I think it's personal, but I'm open to other people's perspective as well, what other people think. Okay.
One thing I would like to add here is
Sure.
that
Please go ahead, Gopal.
showcasing some certifications in the Scrum Master role might be a way to show the manager that, hey, you're retooling yourself in the Scrum Master role. So maybe it's not just the Scrum Master certification. If you are using some tool like Jira, showing like a Jira certification in addition to the Scrum Master certification might be an added difference. So that's what I would add to what people have said.
That's a good point, Gopal. So these are career choices. Like I said earlier, the product management, discipline and career was not even around 15, 20 years ago, right? Scrum Masters, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, wasn't around, right? Agile Coaches wasn't around 10 or 15 years ago, right? But now we have career options, right? And there's a lot of resources available out there. I hate to say Google it, but there's a lot of resources available out there for you to manage your career. Okay, so it's up to all of us as individuals to decide what we want to do in life, and then go get the information and get mentors, right, to help us obtain what we want in life. So there are differences out there, but 20 years from now, it'll change, right? So I would say go for it. Whatever you want to do, figure out what you want and everything. And then, anyone can, those at the Wells land can send me messages and we can talk, because, they're like Billy said, it's up to the managers, it's up to the culture of the organization. Now, a lot of them make decisions based on guess who, the big six consulting firms or other people coming in and suggesting to them that this is where they got to go, right? And then they make those decisions to go forward, and then they pivot as they experience the world and the life, right? So I would just ask everyone to really focus and concentrate on their career. Go get the information, everything, and reach out to people. You can reach out to any and all of us, and we'll be happy to give you advice and mentor you.
All right. So let's segue into the future, because we have spent quite a lot of time on the present, right, where things are. And I have kind of a unique perspective, and that's what I would like to share with everyone. So let's talk about that, right? There are different things that the future holds for different people, but how I really envision, my growth and my journey, really, because we're sharing our journeys, not only from Scaled Agile Framework perspective, but also Agile journeys, is really, I see Scaled Agile Framework or Scrum or any other frameworks that are out there, no matter what the company adopts, to be streamlined and embedded into the DNA of an organization. And what that really means is, like we talk about transformations, right? After some time, when I started my journey, no one was even talking about, project management transformation, right? Project management was so embedded into the DNAs of organizations that that's what everyone was using. And by the way, when we talk about waterfall and project management, there were so many different ways of doing things, right? It just depended on the culture of the organization. And that's kind of how I see things to be. Anything that a company is doing right now would get embedded, and there would not be transformations, right? And I think the whole shift and the focus, and we have talked about a few of these things, is really to be focused on be framework agnostic. Whatever the framework you use, it's there in the organization, but it's really focus shift again to delivering a quality product. And if that doesn't really happen, I feel the organizations, if they don't evolve for making better products, they're probably going to die out. So that's kind of my perspective on it. And there are so many other things that can happen in the future, and I have lots of things that I can talk about. But Joseph, I would like to get your perspective on that. What do you think, as part of your journey, where do you see yourself maybe over the next 5 years, and what do you think you would be involved in?
Yeah, it's very interesting indeed. Now that we've been almost 2 decades into Agile practice, if we start from the Agile Manifesto, let's say 20 years into Agile world. If we start from the SAFe framework, we are almost 1 decade into the SAFe implementation, less implementation, Spotify implementation, DOT implementation, and all these scaled version. One of the things that I noticed in our enterprises, especially right now that I'm working for an enterprise, is that these frameworks are primarily directed on how teams changing their way of work. Like a team was a software development team, was working one way, now we are teaching or coaching them to work another way. But software development teams or any development teams is not the entire organization, it's not the entire enterprise. So what I would like to focus in the coming months would be to study how we can look at the enterprise as a whole, whether it's Wells Fargo, whether it's a Bank of America, whether it's a Boeing, whether it's Ford, or whether it's a small pizzeria shop, how this enterprise as a whole can become nimble, fast, flexible, and agile. That is my interest. In that relation, Billy, I would like to see how understanding the organizational aspect of the enterprise, the how the enterprise is operating, whether these two would be the starting points that you can transform an enterprise as a whole into agile. Not that just the development, the IT side of the organization is agile, but there is. So that's one of the things that intrigues me a lot, Billy.
Okay, that's very interesting. But I do have a question for you. Uh, Now, there's this whole movement, right, as we all know, of business agility, right? But you mentioned the word enterprise agility here. Is that, you being a professor, I'm sure there was the usage of the word enterprise agility is probably intentional. If it's not, maybe, that's a different question. But what do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm glad that you pointed at very fundamental, basically, difference that business agility is. Uh, Frankly speaking, I even don't know how you can go to an organization, make the organization business. Like business does not exist. Like there is no such a thing that you will go and say that, hey, Wells Fargo, I came here to transform your business. You probably transform something else, and that results in the business of the Wells Fargo. Like the business of Wells Fargo is delivering financial services. That's the business of Wells Fargo. But you cannot make business agile. You rather make changes in the organization of the Wells Fargo. You rather make changes in the construction of Wells Fargo. You rather make joining some departments or splitting some departments. Or you remember back with the value stream, you rather make changes in the value stream, and that results in a more nimble delivery. So when people say business agility, first of all, business is an outcome of something else's change. And second thing is that business could be pretty much a decision in the mind of the people. Like you remember when even if you look at the scaled agile framework, business agility, it says rapid response to changes. And that could be pretty much a politics. Like some politics could be very aggressive, some politics organization. So that's why enterprise is that machinery, that system, that nuts and bolts that makes a business to happen. So that is the
Okay, yeah, that's a very unique perspective because I'm not going to use the word struggle because I don't think I ever struggled with it, but I just kind of realized that you had used a different word, and that's kind of, raised my inquisitiveness around that. So that's a very interesting perspective. I know a couple of folks that were chatting earlier have dropped off, but anyone else would like to share their unique perspective on what the future holds and how do you really see this, right? Because Agile has been a movement, our business agility has come around. Just like, when I got into the Agile journey, there was DevOps, right? So now it's kind of evolved into DevSecOps, right? So there's so many other things that are going on. So does anyone want to share like what your perspective would be, what you would be interested in doing? Sorry, looks like I'm seeing you've gone on off mute. Do you want to share what are your thoughts there for the future?
No, I don't have any thoughts.
What's that?
No, I don't have any thoughts. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, no worries, no worries. Anyone else like to share their thoughts? Okay, Jay, again, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you had started on that path about, talking about the future. Do you want to quickly share your thoughts around that?
Sure. So I'm typing. So hold on a second.
No worries.
So one thing I want to point out to everyone is that how many of you are in the PMI world and have project management experience? You can raise your hand. Cool. So have any of you seen the new release of the PMBOK and what they're doing in PMI starting this year? They're moving to,
Yes.
well, go ahead.
Yeah, I said I did review that.
Yeah, and they're moving to more agile, and they're moving to the discipline agile because my friend from IBM is now working for PMI, right? But they have now reduced their disciplines in PMI, and they are now making, I would call a radical change. Okay, it's very radical. They're moving away from the construct that they started in the late 60s and to, more of that, I would say, command and control project manager, right? And they're more adopting an agile way of thinking and an agile way of working, okay? I would say 2021, it's a significant change. How many of you know use cases and how to do use cases? Ivar Yakman, he's the inventor of use cases. Anyone here, raise your hand if you've done that. Cool. So Ivar is moving to user stories. So he has this whole thing now, working with Jeff Sutherland and everything to help teams develop requirements and everything using that format. Now, he hasn't completely given up use cases and how to use case modeling and everything, but I can tell you that's practically dead. No one hardly uses that anymore, right? And I can remember that when that came out, it was like a cool thing, right? So what I'm trying to illustrate here is that the world and the people out there, the majority of the people in the world that's doing this kind of work that we're doing, has made a decision. And that decision is that they're moving towards this more agile way of thinking and this agile way of working. They're believing in the Agile Manifesto, and I think that has to change too. It can't just be about software, right? There's business agility and everything else, right? That has to happen. So it's moving into the business operation side of the organization. There's no software at the end, okay? You can apply Scrum and Kanban and the business operations, right? So we see that transition and it's happening. It's already, the train is moving down the track.
Yeah, interesting.
So what's happening, I see, is that when they did studies and then the world, what's it called? Not the World Health Organization, but the world, geez, my brain.
UNICEF?
Huh?
UNICEF?
And no, but the world, something investment or the banking or whatever. They did a study and they,
IMF.
IMF.
yeah, yeah. And they did a study and they said the number 1 job out there is going to be product people. The number 2 job is going to be agile people, Scrum masters, coaches, whatever. It's number 1 and number 2 jobs in the world. Okay, because that's where the world's going, right? So what does that tell us? That tells us that that the world is moving towards this team kind of structure, team making decisions, organizational model changing, and the notion that people in the organization that you hire have to have the skills and capabilities to innovate and disrupt the market and make change, right? Just like Apple does, right? And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that then that train is going down the track a million miles an hour. Oh, and at the same time, we have to automate and do everything with DevOps. And we have DevOps teams like Microsoft does, right? So that's the future for right now. Of course, it could change, 10 or 20 years from now.
Yeah, right.
Some news thing is found out. So that's where we're going. The other big thing is look for artificial intelligence and machine learning and all that, because I think that's going to disrupt the world and disrupt society. And so look for that to happen. So that's where I see the two big things that are happening. It's more agile and more technology moving. That's now going to really discern the people in society. And that's what I see.
Okay. Yeah, that's again a very unique perspective. Any other thoughts or any other questions that anyone may have?
Prakash, he left, but he asked if we answer one of the questions that he raised, and he said, I have to drop, but I will watch the record. And if,
Sure, Joseph, why don't you bring that question up and see if you can answer that for him?
frankly speaking, here is a question. The question says, any thoughts on where you place your RTEs? Dash in a centralized organization like APMO or distributed with the arts? So basically the question is, where do you place your RTEs? Within APMO or distributed with the arts? That's the question. So
why don't you take a stab at that first? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah.
Where do you think they should be placed?
Yeah, I would say that they are in both places. They are with the art in order to make sure that the art is operating in optimum mode and the art has a servant leadership. But then at the AP, at the portfolio level, they are basically are part of the portfolio. If you look at the SAFe portfolio, those triangles or three major dimensions or three major functions, RTE, STE are part of that portfolio level. So I would say that primarily RTE is with the art. That's the name of the RTE. That they are driving an agile release stream. That's the name comes. But they are presenting the interest of the art as well as the cross the art and also alignment with the value stream, etc., at the portfolio level. Now, the question is whether they are sitting in a PMO. I would say that, frankly speaking, I personally have no specific, how to say, opinion on that. Because organizationally they might be belong somewhere, because like HR or reporting, they might belong to somewhere. So I don't know, Billy, if you would like.
That's great, Joseph, because I am of the similar opinion, and I'm just going to give a classic consultant answer, right? It just depends, right? So I've seen it work both ways, and there are pros and cons both ways. And that's how it is, really. Depends on how you want to structure your organization. And it's really, ultimately, I think we all make it about, all the organizations make it about reporting. Yeah. Ultimately, what the role, it doesn't matter where the RTE reports. I think, as long as that person is able to fulfill that role, right, and the responsibilities associated with that role, I would say that, that reporting structure, whether they report within an ARC or whether they actually stay and lie within an APMO, doesn't really matter, I think, right? Now, if they become constraints, either ways, right, depending on the reporting structure on the RTE, that's where I see the problem. So it just depends on, what problem you're trying to solve. So I don't see that as a problem on how, where the RTE. All right, I know we have been together for an hour, 45 minutes. Just want to see if there are any other questions that anyone has. We'd be more than happy. Otherwise, we can just wrap it up. So this is your one last chance to ask any questions that you may have. Anyone?
Hey, Billy and Joseph, can I add to the answers you gave for the RTEs?
Please, Gopal, please.
So I would agree with you. I also go with it depends, but I would like to add a dimension to it,
Sure.
which is the leadership styles of the organizational leaders or the senior leaders. Sometimes the senior leaders like to have the RTEs in their organizations rather than in a centralized place. Sometimes they don't mind either way. I mean, ultimately the RTEs have to work cross-functionally and have to be effective cross-functionally and have to have that cross-cultural bridge, ability to build that cross-cultural bridge between the different organizations. But you also need to take into account the leadership style of the different business leaders or the stakeholders when you figure out whether the RTE should be centralized or whether it should be decentralized or distributed across the different business units. That is the one dimension I would like to add.
Sure, makes sense. Makes sense.
That's a wonderful angle or dimensions that you indeed. Gopal, if I may ask you, like based on years of experience and expertise that you have, would you recommend or would you suggest, like apart from what is the existing style, assumes that you are given a freedom of that, hey, you can change our style, give us an advice. Would you recommend that RTs would be better off, and also coaches, that they are part of APMO? Or you would say that, no, let them be distributed, let them be part of the, functionally, or and reporting part of the arts.
Yeah,
And
I believe in a crowdsourcing in terms of decision making as well as culturally. Much more open culture is what I personally believe in. I learn from nature. So if you look at how the human being is structured, right? We have a brain, which is central, but we have ganglions that are not part of the brain, but attached to the brain, but make decisions at the limbic level. So we need both. We need a central place to help with the organizational directions and vision and all that. And there is a certain role for that, but we also need the ganglions at the edge so that the decision making there is no decision latency. So we need both to make sure that we are agile as an organization. And I do believe in that open, multidimensional approach in terms of decision making, in terms of organizational development.
Yeah, that's a good perspective, Gopal. Yeah, because I see what you're saying, but I think a lot of time what happens is, as much as we would want both of those to coexist, we're always made to make decisions, right? Like one way or the other, and that's where the tricky part is, right? Like, where do RTs report? They need to be either here or over there, and that's where it becomes really interesting, right? So yeah, really interesting thoughts. Thanks for sharing that. All right, any other questions or any other thoughts?
Hi, Leona. If it's all right, speaking of decision making, I'm curious, based on everybody's experience, or you guys in particular within SAFe, how do you observe the decision making of people? Is it more or is it less? If that makes sense.
I don't know if I understood that question clearly. Joseph, did you understand that? Could you
Okay, let me try one more time.
Okay.
So within SAFe, there's lots of different things that are people trying to happen with an RTE and so forth. What about the members of the team? Based on your observation, how would you describe the decision making of the teams and members that are part of it?
I think my perspective is the whole idea about whether you look at SAFe or even the Agile mindset is really decentralized decision making, right? Now, Lena, does it happen right from the get-go? I mean, that would be unrealistic to say that it happens, right? So during the adoption, during the transformation, the whole idea is to, organize in such a way that you can have as much flat organization as you can. Again, it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen right from the get-go, but that's the idea, ideally, and then really have the decentralized decision making. But then again, you want to distinguish between some of the decisions probably need to be made by the managers, the leaders, but everything else, right, like software development, the SMEs, I would depend on them to really make that decision, which would be decentralized. So that's just my thought on whether it doesn't matter what framework you use, right? And that's why SAFe also has these different roles so that they release to an engineer, the scrum masters don't necessarily report into each other, but it's from the decentralized decision-making perspective. Joseph, do you have a perspective on that?
Yeah, I would fully agree. What Gopal said earlier, that was a brilliant explanation, and what Billy just said. So basically, Lena, if you go by the concept of the SAFe framework, the concept of the same framework regarding to decision making says it, decisions must be made in the place that has most information for taking that decision and has impact in that place. And also the frequency requires that place to take the decision. For example, if it is something that the team has the information for it, then team is empowered to take a decision. But if there is a decision that the team don't have enough information, they move it one level up. And if they don't have it, they move it up. So there are some guidelines on how to make decisions. One of them is if local information is needed, make local decision. If the frequency requires it, like too often decision must be made, make it local. If there is no impact outside of the local, make it local. But if a decision may have impact wider than the circle of the decision maker, move it to centralized. Or if these are like rare decisions, move it to the centralized. So that's from conceptual point of view. But as Bailey said, obviously that there is lots of cultural, there is lots of style, there is lots of organizational legacy perspective. Thank you.
Right. No, I totally appreciate you guys sharing that perspective of how SAFe was set up and so forth. I was curious to hear what the experience has been like that you guys observed. Like, do people welcome the decision making, or do they shy away from it in reality? Right. Like in the beginning, I totally understand that when they make decisions in the beginning, they will be a little on edge, maybe not sure. Let's figure out, it's a learning growth opportunity, so forth. But with time, do people welcome, like, yeah, we're okay to make decision, or holy moly, who's going to make it for us? And from that point of view.
Right. And also developing that muscle, right? Because, we as coaches, we just don't want to say that, yes, I mean, local decision making, you guys go make that decision, right? It doesn't happen, right? So, some people need to be mentored, and really, when we empower people, it comes with the responsibility, right? That's what I say. And some people are not ready to do that. So they need to be enabled, right? That switch needs to be turned on for them. And again, that takes time. Because, as much as we say theoretically that, yes, we want the local people to make decisions where the information is available, but we still need to enable that. We still need to turn that switch on. And that's how it really works in the world, right? Yeah.
Gotcha. Thanks for sharing. I saw the 2-minute warning, so really appreciate you guys sharing all along.
Yeah, no problem.
Cool.
Thank you. Jay, I just want to thank for this opportunity, because, this has been really great. Not just sharing our experiences and journeys, but also getting other people's perspective on, and we kind of built a presentation based on the past, present, and the future. That was kind of the underlying current there. And I think it was just amazing. So I just want to, any parting words, Joseph, and then want to hand it back to Jay.
I just want to say that thank you so much for the privilege of sharing our humble experience with you. And thank you very much for making it interactive right from the beginning. And Jay, you set up an organization that I commend you for this successful meetup. Thank you very much. And you all have a wonderful evening.
Well, thank you, Billy and Joseph. I think it was a great session. So I'm going to record this. Like I said before, put it up on our YouTube site. I'll send it out to everyone and notify everyone. And thank you, Billy and Joseph. Fantastic. Great. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you everyone else for joining. And if you have any questions or anything, you got my email. It's out there and I sent it to everyone. Just hook me up and we're going to have some more of these. And I'm sure Billy and Joseph will be back. So thank you. And we'll see everyone again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank
you, guys.
Thank you.